My husband and I like each other, but he doesn't want to be in the press because he's proud of me and loves show business. The way we met was too funny. He's very shy and awkward, so it wasn't like him to pull over and start talking to a girl. What a great love story. Dolly Parton's husband, Carl Dean, died at age 82, supporting her in love and in her career. Carl stayed out of the spotlight for almost 60 years, making him a mystery even to Dolly's biggest fans. But behind closed doors, their love was unbreakable. Until one last phone call changed everything. I've had the pleasure of sitting down with Dolly over the years, and she has sometimes told me about their almost 60-year marriage. In his last moments, Carl broke his silence and sent Dolly a message that was so unexpected and deeply personal that it made her cry. What did he say, and why did he say it? I love the old guy. He's the only one I've ever wanted and the only one I'll ever have. Come with us as we learn more about the love story that shocked Hollywood. Dolly Parton has been famous for over 60 years with hits like Jolene, 9 to 5, and I Will Always Love You. She has built an empire that goes beyond music into philanthropy, business, and even theme parks. But while Dolly's infectious personality and Dolly Parton's larger-than-life personality and mysterious husband, Carl Dean, have captivated the world, it's not often that a music legend like Dolly Parton shows up in town, but yesterday she graced the stage of the historic Lyric Theater in Lexington. Carl Dean has been married to Dolly for almost 58 years and was the silent force behind her success. Unlike the high-profile Hollywood men, Carl Dean chose to stay out of the spotlight. Couples who are always in the news, Dolly and Carl's relationship was shrouded in mystery. Fans have long wondered why Carl stayed out of the public eye. Was he just a private person, or was there more to the story? Now, for the first time, a final phone call has surfaced with Carl Dean's last words to Dolly Parton before his death. What he said in those last moments will shock you. On paper, Dolly Parton and Carl Dean were complete opposites. She was a young singer in Nashville who wanted to make it big, and he was a quiet, straightforward man who liked the simple life. But somehow their love story defied the odds and lasted nearly 6 decades, leaving fans both confused and fascinated. How did they meet? In the summer of 1964, 18-year-old Dolly Parton had just moved to Nashville to follow her dreams. One afternoon, she was waiting outside a wishy-washy laundromat when a 21-year-old man in an old Chevrolet truck pulled up. Dean fell in love with Dolly at first sight. Carl later said that he told himself, "I'm going to marry that girl." Dolly, on the other hand, was shocked by Carl's charm and confidence. Unlike the smooth-talking businessman she had met, Carl was quiet and sure of himself. As they started talking, she realized he wasn't just trying to impress her, he was interested in who she was. By the end of their first conversation, Carl was engaged to Dolly. They agreed to go on a date, but Carl had to meet Dolly's family first. As we get older, we can see how perfectly it was meant to be. Over the next 2 years, Carl and Dolly's relationship grew stronger. Unlike many young men in Nashville, Carl wasn't interested in the entertainment world. He wasn't drawn to the bright lights or the allure of fame. Instead, he wanted a simple life with Dolly. On May 30, 1966, they secretly married in Ringgold, Georgia. At the time, Dolly's record label told her not to get married because they thought it would hurt her rising career. But Dolly and Carl weren't going to let the expectations of the industry control their love. Instead of a big wedding, they said their vows in a small church where no one would notice. Dolly later said she wore a simple dress, and Carl, always the practical man, wore a suit that he could use for other occasions. In an interview, Dolly remembered that they didn't do anything special for the wedding. They weren't fancy. They just knew they wanted to be together. That desire to be together on their own terms became the basis of their marriage from the start. Carl made it clear that he didn't want fame. While Dolly was wowing audiences and climbing the charts, Carl was happy running his asphalt paving business and living a private life. His absence from red carpets and award shows led fans to wonder why Carl never seemed to be by Dolly's side at big events. Rumors spread that he was embarrassed of her. Some people even wondered if Carl Dean was real and Dolly had made him up. Dolly always laughed off the rumors and said that Carl's choice to stay out of the public eye wasn't about avoiding her success, it was about staying true to himself. Still, questions lingered. Was Carl's choice to live in the shadows just for privacy, or was there another reason he stayed hidden for so many years? Join us as we look deeper into Carl Dean's life, away from events. Keep your seats glued, because the truth about Carl Dean's mysterious life is about to come out. We're different people, but we work so well together. He's kind of a loner, so he doesn't really like being with anyone but me. We love and respect each other, and I think the key to it all is that we both have a crazy, warped sense of humor. Carl Dean's mysterious life away from fame. Unlike other celebrity spouses who enjoy the perks of fame, Carl didn't care about it. He rarely went to events. Carl never did interviews or photos with the public, and some fans went decades without seeing a new picture of him. But why keep watching? People who knew him well say that his extreme privacy wasn't about keeping things secret, it was about comfort. One close friend once said that he was a homebody who loved Dolly but didn't like the attention that came with being married to her. Carl liked spending his days at their home in Brentwood, Tennessee, away from the flashing camera. He liked simple things like reading, taking care of their property, and driving around in his truck. He was happy being the man who supported Dolly behind the scenes over the years. Because Carl wasn't in public life very often, every sighting was a big deal. But despite these rare sightings, Carl continued to stay out of the spotlight. Even Dolly admitted that Carl had only seen her perform live once in their whole marriage, and it wasn't at a big concert, but at a small club early in her career. Dolly once said that he told her he loved her and would support her, but he didn't need to watch her do her thing. As time went on, more and more people started to wonder why Carl was so against fame. Some thought he had social anxiety, while others thought he just didn't like the chaos of the entertainment business. One of the more interesting ideas was that Carl had never imagined how famous Dolly would become when they started dating. He wanted a quiet life with his talented wife, not the sudden fame that followed. Whatever the reason, Carl never wavered in his decision to stay out of the public eye, and their love stayed strong even though their marriage was different. In the end, Carl Dean was an outlier in the world of celebrity marriages. He wasn't interested in fame, money, or the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. All he wanted was a quiet life with the woman he fell in love with. Carl was last seen outside of a laundromat in 1964, and that's exactly what he did for almost 60 years. Carl had always been private, but people close to the couple noticed small changes. Friends and family said that he became even more distant in his later years, spending more time in their Brentwood home. While Dolly continued to run her businesses and perform, she was also taking on a heavier workload to care for the man who had been by her side for almost 60 years. Rumors spread that Carl's health was getting worse. Dolly kept quiet about her husband because he told her, "I didn't choose this world, I chose you. You chose that world." When asked about her husband in interviews, she always answered with warmth, never revealing the problems they had behind closed doors. But those who knew her best saw the weight she carried. A close friend said she never let it show, but they knew Dolly knew the end was near, but she wanted to make every moment count. Even though Carl's health was getting worse, one of the most emotional times in their later years was when they renewed their wedding vows in 2016. Dolly had joked that she wanted a big fancy wedding because their first ceremony was so small, but this time it wasn't about the show, it was about reaffirming their love while they still had time in a small ceremony at their home with only 3 close family members. One of their family members said it was one of Carl wasn't a very talkative man, but that day he held Dolly's hand and told her she was still the love of his life. It was a moment of happiness in the midst of uncertainty, but Carl's health got worse over time, and then she got the phone call that changed everything. "My husband and I get along great. It's our first marriage, and we like each other." Dolly Parton knew this day would come, but nothing could have prepared her for the moment she heard it. Carl Dean's health had gotten worse over the past few months, and even though he rarely left the house, Dolly still had obligations she couldn't ignore. On the night of the call, she was at a performance, fulfilling yet another duty to her fans. But something felt off about Carl's insistence on talking to Dolly earlier that evening, something he hadn't done in a long time. Carl had always been supportive of her career, but he had never been one to call while she was busy. When Dolly's phone rang backstage, her heart skipped a beat. She knew something was wrong. Carl's voice was barely above a whisper, but there was a determination in his tone that sent chills down her spine. He told her that he just needed to hear her voice one last time. She fought to stay strong, holding back the tears that were threatening to overpower her. She asked him how he was feeling, hoping for reassurance, but knowing that time was running out. But he didn't answer. Even in his last moments, he wasn't thinking about himself, he was thinking about her. He had one last thing he wanted to say before it was too late. There was a short pause that felt heavier than any words could. Then, with the last of his strength, he spoke the words that would stay with Dolly for the rest of her life. Never stop singing for a moment. Dolly was speechless. She felt like the air had been sucked out of her lungs. Carl had always been there for her from the shadows. During his last moments, he wasn't thinking about himself. He was thinking about her. She cried as she held the phone and begged Carl not to talk like that and that she would be home soon, but she knew that Carl was saying goodbye that night. Dolly cut her trip short and rushed home, but Carl was already unconscious when she got there. She sat next to him, held his hand, and whispered to him the way he had always done it. Dolly Parton sang to Carl Dean, her voice breaking with emotion as she knew it would be the last time he would ever hear her. Carl Dean, who had loved Dolly Parton for almost 60 years, took his last breath early the next morning. Carl Dean's last words weren't what anyone expected. He could have told her how much he loved her and how much he would miss her, but instead he told her to keep going, keep singing, keep shining, and keep being the woman he fell in love with. In the days after Carl's death, Dolly did what she always did. She put on a brave face and kept performing and writing music to make people happy, but those closest to her knew the truth. She sang because he told her to, and she carried him with her in every note, song, and moment on stage. Carl Dean may have spent his life avoiding the spotlight, but in the end, his love for Dolly became the greatest story of all. Wigs all the time because they're so convenient, and I'm always busy, so I really enjoy wearing them. Carl kept this secret until the end. Carl's shyness had been a mystery for years. Some thought he just didn't like being famous, while others thought it was a sign of something deeper. It was, in fact, something deeper. Dolly had always respected his wishes and never pushed him into the spotlight. Their relationship was based on trust and understanding, and she knew that his life would always be separate from hers. Carl tried to hide the truth from everyone, but as his health got worse, it became too much for him to handle. In his last days, he finally told everyone what he had been hiding for so long. He had avoided the public eye not because he liked being there, but because he was afraid of being watched, judged, and looked at. He had stayed away from everyone his whole life, not because he didn't love Dolly, but because he was scared of the world around her. He had carried this burden in silence, never letting it affect her career. Was never meant to be ignored. It was an act of love. He wanted to protect her from the weight of his problems so that nothing would stop her. Carl's confession changed the story of their relationship. He had been misunderstood for staying out of the spotlight, but it had been a sacrifice because by doing so, he had given Dolly the freedom to shine without worrying about his well-being. His final admission did not change their love. It only made it more important. He had spent his whole life ignoring her. He loved Dolly in the way he thought was best by making sure her dreams were not affected, and when he died, he knew that she would continue to do what he had always wanted. After almost 6 decades of marriage, Dolly Parton faced life without the man who had been her anchor. She had always been famous, but her grief was very private. In the days after he died, she stayed out of the public eye so she could mourn away from the world's eyes. When she finally spoke about his death, Carl had been the love of her life, and his death meant that she would never fully get over his absence. When Dolly lost Carl, she turned to the things that had always helped her get through hard times. Music became a safe place for her to be and a way for her to heal. She sat at the piano and let her feelings flow into melodies that she kept for herself as personal tributes to the man who had loved her from the shadows. Faith remained another source of strength for her. She leaned on the beliefs that had guided her since she was a child. Though she took comfort in the thought that Carl was still with her in spirit, her family was also very important to her as she learned to live without him. Months after Carl's death, Dolly finally opened up about her grief. She talked about the quiet moments that hurt the most, the need to reach for him in the morning, and the urge to share a thought before remembering that he was no longer there. But even in her sadness, she found strength. She talked about the love that never faded and the presence she still felt in her life. Carl had always told her to keep going, keep singing, and never let anything stop her. So, even though it hurt, she did just that to honor his memory. Over the years, Dolly had written a lot of songs, some of which became famous hits, and others that were kept secret and never meant for the public. There was one song she had written just for Carl that she had kept secret. It was a deeply personal piece that she had written in a quiet moment when she was pouring all of her love, gratitude, and devotion into lyrics that he was meant to hear after he died. Dolly knew that this song would be her tribute to him. It wasn't just music, it was a part of their love story and a reflection of the life they had shared. She decided to release it not for fame or attention, but as a final love letter to the man who had been her biggest source of strength. Dolly also looked at the house they had shared. Every corner of it held memories, from the quiet mornings they spent together to the funny nights they had spent together that no one else had. The place had been their safe haven, a place where they could escape the outside world and just be themselves. Instead of leaving it behind or letting it fade into the past, she planned to keep it as a tribute to their life together, whether it was as a family space, a private retreat, or something even more special. She wanted to make sure that the love they had built inside those walls would never be forgotten. Carl Dean's presence was never defined by public appearances, and his love for Dolly remained just as strong when he wasn't there. Dolly's love story was just as strong. Every time she went on stage and sang, every note carried a piece of the man who had stood by her, unseen but unwavering even in loss. His last words stayed with her. She would keep going, she would keep singing, and in every song, every performance, every moment of joy, Carl would always be there. I can't tell you how much that meant to me because I made the Imagination Library as a tribute to my dad. What do you think? Do you believe in love like this? What do you think? Tell me in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Also, click on the videos below. You'll love them.